Hi, wonderful people. I'm Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, University of Melbourne professor, founder of the Gender Equity Initiative, director of the Future of Work Lab, woman, wife, and mother, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Together, we'll deep dive into the research to get to the bottom of all these misperceptions that are holding all of us back. Don't worry, I've studied these types of questions for decades, and after publishing countless articles exactly on these topics, I know when they are nonsense or real truths. And I'm going to help you learn that too. So here we go. Let's do it. This is Misperceived. Do you have a work wifey? Do you have a work hubby? Do you have a work partner? Is there someone at your workplace that is like your best friend? Your partner in crime? Do you make friends at work, or do you think actually no one should be friends at work? Because man, that place is toxic and hard and we should just have strong boundaries. Is it good to have workplace friendships? Do you have them? Do you like them? What happens? And do you find that if you have a workplace friendship, you're more productive? Or are you like us and our team where sometimes we just end up wasting our days laughing, talking about the latest celebrity gossip, and eating good snacks? What does it look like for you? On today's episode of Misperceived, we're going to look at, is it a misperception that workplace friendships are bad? And are they particularly bad for women? I'm going to talk to you today about a chapter in a book, Understanding Workplace Relationships, that is an edited volume from Gerbasi et al. But this article in particular is by Natalie David, James Contino, and Julia Brennicke, and it's Workplace Friendships, Antecedents, Consequences, and New Challenges for Employees and Organizations. So they're talking about, basically that friendships in the workplace have been around for a very long time, that we make friends at work, and this has been true for a long period of time. And then they talk a little bit about how workplace friendships become more common, in particular in certain types of work, because we have now become more interdependent on each other at work, and we're more reliant on each other in teams. And what this means is that we have to come together in the workplace in ways that help us build friendships that are closer, because we're working towards, a common work goal, or we're working towards something together. And what that means is that our lives at work and home become more blurred, that we are working more, we're spending more time at work. And so what this means is that we're spending a lot of time with these people, and the ways in which we're working brings us together. And so it makes sense that we build friendships and connect. And they're talking about hey, this makes sense because kind of modern workforces can be more interdependent, and that we have, more opportunity to connect in the workplace. But this can be actually positive, or it could be negative. If we have more friendships at work, does this do good things for us, or does this do bad things for us? Well, and there's research in both directions. So if you have friends at work, you report more better well-being at work, you're more satisfied with your job, and that organizational performance can actually go up. But of course, if there's conflict in those friendships, if you build friendships and it creates conflict, that tension can actually lead to negative outcomes. So we can have greater emotional exhaustion. We can have worse job performance if we actually have friendship groups that have turned sour on us. And they're talking about workplace friendships can kind of bond because often we're working together on a shared task, but sometimes we're competing with each other. We're competing for things like a promotion. We're competing for things like visibility. And so these can be things that impact how we interact with our friends at work. So our assumption that this is not I guess what I'm trying to say here is this is not a simple friendship, because there are multiple pieces going on, right? You are not just there to hang out and be friends. You're there to hang out and be friends. Well, not really. Your employer's probably mad about that, but you're there to get things done, and you're there to try to get raises and promotions. So these create complexity in our workplace friendships. And what this article is going to do, or this chapter, is they want to say, how did it come about that we have these things called workplace friendships, and what is a workplace friendship? And then they want to talk about, what are the consequences of that, and what are the implications in the long term? What does that mean for work-life balance, and what are the consequences of us being friends, of us having a work wifey or a work hubby or workplace friends on our lives more general? And what they say is, what in the first place is a workplace friendship? How do we define workplace friendships? And because they're different than maybe how you would define a friendship in other areas of your life. And what they say is like basically workplace friendships are these informal relationships that, you're coming together because you're like each other, not because you're in a boss employee relationship. Although I try to make everyone my friend anyway. So that's inappropriate boundaries. They're often voluntary. You're free to engage in them or not. You can choose whether you engage in a workplace friendship, and they're reciprocal. So there's some sort of reciprocal affect. So we like each other, we're committed to each other, and that we exchange either emotional or other types of support. So in this respect, they're kind of similar to other types of friendships, but they're happening in this very specific context. And they're saying like basically there's research showing that if you have workplace friendships at a workplace, that it can benefit the organization. There's all this research about networks at work, like how do you help disseminate information across networks, especially if you work in a different team. And they basically are saying like, hey, if you have friendships sitting across your workplace, that's a really good way to disseminate knowledge across the organization. It's a really good way to help people connect to the organization. And it's a really good way to create connection across teams that might be siloed. But if they have a friendship, you're building networks across, say, a team in sales, to a team in HR, to a team in fill in the blank. And so this can really be beneficial to the organization that's either trying to disseminate knowledge or information across, help innovation, and break up the siloed teams. And so that's one argument, like these workplace friendships are really good. There's a counter argument that comes through early sociological research that says actually it's bad, that actually what we need is that we need a bureaucracy, that basically organizations, as they get more complex, evolve into a more complex bureaucracy. So imagine if I am a small business, there's 5 employees, we know each other. As this business grows, we get more people and the organization becomes more formal and kind of there's different departments. And that over time, as workplaces get bigger, they become more divided, more separate, more siloed. And that's a way to create organizational effectiveness. That's a way to kind of effectively allocate the work. But the result is that it becomes more formal. And so therefore friendships are less essential and our goals of the organization changes. It's about success. It's about KPIs. It's about delivering stuff to other people. And so what they're saying is that there's this really interesting backdrop against which friendships are being made in workplaces that can create these kind of tensions and conflicts because there's different norms, there's different rules about how we act as friends at work than maybe how we act as friends at home. And that is in part because we have friendships at work that are work focused, but they're also about exchanging resources and they're about competition and they're about where we sit in this hierarchy. And so then they start to talk about like what causes people to create friendships in the workplace. And I thought you might like this because you might think like, who are my workplace friends and how did we become friends at the workplace? And they give this like review, they give a little table about the review of all the literature. And they basically say that like, part of it is proximity. Are you close to someone? Part of it is, are you similar to that person? Do you communicate and do you have shared tasks? That helps bond you to someone. Then there's these questions about what's your personality? What's your race? What's your gender? And then they start to think about like, hey, actually, it can matter the type of workplace you're in. Like, are you in a group or a team? What does your organization? Is there a culture of collaboration or is there a culture of competition? Because that will really impact how you build friendships. Then there's these kind of questions about like the structure of the organization and whether you're in person. They call it virtuality. Are you in person or are you online? And that helps you to build greater relationships. So they run through this article by C.S. and Cahill, and they said that like friendships in organizations between peers have 3 moments that bring people together. The first is that like, do we work close to each other? Do we have things in common? And do we socialize outside of work? That gets you from being a coworker to a friend. Then you go from being a friend to a close friend because you need something, you need shared support, or you need help with either a work or a personal problem. And then that results in you having a more frequent, intimate, and personal communication. Now, if you listen to our friendship podcast, you're going to see there's some parallels, right, about what drives people together. And then there is a transition from close friend to almost best friend that is characterized by this increase in intimacy and support around your work and your personal problems. And you go from that workplace friend to that workplace wifey or bestie because you start to do some outside of the organization socializing. You start to hang out outside of work, right? You're like, I'm going to tell you everything about my life and about work, and we're going to hang out not just here at work. Does this happen for you? Like, I'm actually curious. Did you find that you have a workplace wifey or hubby or partner or whomever? And did you have this transition from coworker to friend because you just were close and you started to hang out and you had things to do? And then did you go from friend to close friend because something bad happened at work and you had to talk about it? And then did you go from close friend to best friend because, wow, like you're going to share everything bad that happened at work and everything bad that happened at home, and you are going to move in together when you're not at work and just hang out all the time? Is this your sequence, or did you have something different? I'm going to tell you. We have an Instagram. Tell us at Misperceived Podcast or at Prof. Leah, like what happened for you. And we'll probably put up a poll, so get ready. I have a workplace hubby, wifey, partner in crime. And I'll tell you, this is actually true. Like, it started out with, do we know each other? Do we kind of have shared interests? And then it just took like one person in the workplace to try to cut one of us, right? To try to really tear us down. That then we're like, did that happen to you? Did that happen to you? Am I valid? And that person was like, yeah, girl, it's all right. You see this right. To now, an everyday 5 p.m. phone call about the list of grievances we have in every aspect of our lives, to vacations away. And by vacations, I mean work trips away, where we are laying in hotel rooms, just eating takeaway and just laughing about the insanity that it is to be a human at this moment in time, just from top to bottom. And the other day, actually, we had this conversation of like we know things are really bad for us when we can't laugh at the insanity, like when we stop laughing. That's when we stop calling each other because we know like, oh no, we need a break from this. But usually what it is like a daily call about, listen to this insanity. And then just 30 minutes of laughing where we share what happened here, what happened there. I'll tell you, I'm pretty angry though, because my workplace hubby always seems to be on the side of my own husband. And that is infuriating, like probably pretty good for my marriage, but not good in terms of my validation, me becoming really, really a toxic wife and partner at home. So I'm a little unhappy about that. But I've brought it up multiple times, but my workplace partner has said that I need to hear these truths. Then there's this question about like what happens if you have workplace relationships. Is it good for you? Is it good for an employer? And there's answers, people are more satisfied with the job if they have workplace friendships. But if people are bullying, if there's a lot of bullying on the job, that actually having a workplace friend is really critical. It helps to buffer against the toxicity of a workplace to have someone who is your friend who you can share with. So it's not only about information sharing, but it also is about buffering a negative work environment. There's also research showing that if you have more workplace friendships, you're less likely to leave the organization. You see more informal leadership, and that people are much more likely to speak up with good ideas or good suggestions. There's more safety to share. There's another study by Leah and Duffy, 2018. You're at a workplace and you envy someone. Like you're there and you're like, I want to be that person. If they're your friend, you're much more likely to go to them to help learn and get support than not. So I guess I'm just saying like there can be some toxic stuff that happens at the workplace, right? But if you actually are feeling these envious feelings, but you like that person, you're much less likely to become part of the problem. You're going in a productive way. So is it good to be friends with your boss? Well, there's a question about what that person is providing you. If they're providing you with emotional support and advice, then actually it's really good for team performance. But there are some negative consequences of both being friends up and to the side. One of that is, if things go wrong, it can create tension, that actually it can create cliques. If there's a lot of cliques, it can create negative consequences. That there's a way in which we, transfer information, both good and bad, through our friendship groups. People said, we have a whole episode on gossip, but they talk about how actually having workplace friendships can be a source of transmission of positive and negative gossip, but it also can be a way to transmit tension. So if things are going wrong, if the workplace is toxic and it doesn't feel good and people are deeply connected. Now, I'm sure we've all been in a job like this where everything feels like it's going wrong, that actually the social networks within it, the friendship groups are going to transmit good and bad. They're going to transmit the tension in the organization. They're going to transmit the drama in the organization, the joy and the love. So it's suggesting to you that organizational culture around it really does matter. Now, because this is often about a study about women, I'm going to ask you, like, what does it mean for a woman? What does it mean in terms of women building networks? Should they be on the lookout for some things? There's some research that's old. I'm saying 1992 old, and I'm just flagging that because I don't know if this is true. They say that actually white men tend to have a wider range of networks and they're more like them. Women tend to have an overlap between their friendship and their work network, and that can make it very hard for them to move up the ranks. And women tend to build more kind of intimate and persistent relationships and be less transactional. And so this might actually be harder for them to then leverage that for status, because it's hard to then, if it's competitive, leverage that up or go above your friend or whatever for status attainment. They also talk about this idea that, like, should women have across gender networks? What does that look like? And that it is actually quite critical to do that. But they talk about this thing called a glass partition. It limits women's ability to connect and network with peers and supervisors, especially in men-dominated organizations. And in part, that is because of the fear of workplace romances and sexual harassment that can occur. That when women are trying to build networks, it can be misinterpreted as sexual advances. And so as they're trying to build within organizational networks and friendships across gender lines, that network can get confused. That sometimes that can be interpreted as romantic advances. And it puts this women in this position of limiting their networks. And then they talk a little bit about how younger people actually are starting to expect stricter boundaries between workplace and friendship, that this is a hard boundary being drawn. And so there's this question, right, about what we expect of people. It would be silly for us to think about building friendships and networks in this void. Like, it's not fraught, it is fraught. And so this idea that women build networks to men at work? Of course. Does that make them vulnerable to inappropriate behavior? Probably. And I'm sure you've all had experiences of that. I have a lot of experiences of that, where my ability to create networks or my enthusiasm for other people has been misinterpreted. And younger people are thinking about, how do I create boundaries between work and home? And what does that look like in work and life? And what does that mean in terms of my ability to advance in my career? What does that mean about my ability to build networks, to build opportunities? And so I think it's important to say networks are so critical. And we know that workplaces are doing this, and I'm using networks and friendships interchangeably here, but they're really different things. So how do you think about your workplace as you move forward? When you think about, who are your workplace wifeys, besties, hubbies, and how are they different from your networks? And how do they all fit together to create the life and career that you want? The short answer is, workplace wifeys and besties are good until things go bad. And then as things go bad, it makes your work harder. But when things are going bad, if you have that person who's there for support, it's incredibly beneficial. So I think the goal is to find your people, to figure out who is that person in your network, and to be clear. I guess this is, now I'm just giving you career advice, like, to be clear on what you're trying to achieve. Not everyone has to be your workplace friend. They can be your workplace network informally, but they don't have to become your wifey or your hubby or your partner. They can just be a network. And so being really crystal clear on the networks and being understanding that it's not easy for everyone. There's power dynamics that are being negotiated throughout. I mean, there are some advantages of becoming friends at work. Have you seen that Instagram or TikTok trend where you basically are trying to convince your boss that any job you have to do is a 2-person job just so you get to hang out and goof around together? I hope you're in that workplace, and I hope your boss tells you to fuck off, but because you love each other that much. But don't we all want to be in that kind of workplace where all the nonsense that we have to do and the day-to-day tasks we get to do together because we love each other and it's more fun? It's more fun to be in the nonsense together. This is my wish for you. My wish for you is that that comes true. And also my wish for myself, honestly. As per usual, thank you for listening to Misperceived, where you don't need a PhD, but you just get to hang out with me. If you could subscribe, put the review on, we will love it. The thing is, too, we are like climbing up the charts, and that is all thanks to you. So everything you're doing is recognized and seen by us, and it really is making a difference. So I just want to say thank you. Mwah. This podcast was produced with the support of the incredible Sophie Squires, the wonderful Kate Danger, the fantastic Rich Berner, and the one and only, the best ever made, Serena Reagan. I would like to acknowledge that our podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.